this morning, and I would like to welcome Sonja Taylor, who is a faculty member in our University Studies program at Portland State University. She is the director of Senior Inquiry and teaches in that program. Senior Inquiry is a unique program. It is one where faculty members from Portland State team with instructors at local high schools, particularly high schools where students might not be likely to go to college. And they teach our 15 credit year-long interdisciplinary freshman course in the high schools together. And students have opportunities to come onto our college campus, and they are fully enrolled PSU students as well as being enrolled in their high school programs. So with that, I will turn it over to Sonja, and we will learn about her research ePortfolio that she uses with her students throughout the year.
Thanks, Candace. So I don't know if everybody here went or saw my kickoff conversation with Tracy, and did you guys share the video of my examples, or did that get out?
I'm just realizing I meant to link it in the information, and I think I forgot to, so I'll make sure that it's up there it'll go in the gallery as well.
I'll go through those again. I just want to make sure I'm not repeating myself more than you would like me to. But I guess I've been doing ePortfolio for a long time, and I just try and find new ways to fit it into my class. And I developed a series of workbooks with a course designer in our Office of Academic Innovation that was really based around helping students understand their academic identity. And I've been doing that for a couple of years. And then I have this year-long research project, and I just thought, well, why don't I workbook that too? And then they can have an artifact around research, and then it's like 2 high impact practices in one. So I did that, and I didn't really, I didn't know what it would look like. And then I was like, oh, this is the most awesome thing ever. So I decided that I would, come here and talk about it. And what I found was that I added, because it was ePortfolio, I added reflective pieces to the process and the project. And that just became really powerful because it embedded the student in their own research and help them build the narrative for the paper. And so what their reflection was on one piece would then become part of the next part of their paper. And it would just got much easier to put together. And then at the end, you could just read their reflections on it and look at the images. And you could look at the, specific full paper if you wanted to, but you could just look at their reflections and the images they chose and really see how they had engaged with the topic and why it was meaningful to them. So I wanted to know, what are you interested in? What questions do you have about using ePortfolio to do research or to showcase research projects? And I guess we're a small enough group, we could just go around and everyone could say who they are and what hopes they have for the presentation or workshop.
I can go first. So my name is Victoria Harding. I'm from Salt Lake Community College. I'm kind of just here to listen and just kind of learn. So I don't really have anything in particular that I don't know, wanted to come in for, but I kind of just wanted to listen and see what you have to say.
Awesome, welcome.
I can go next. My name is Elise Helen. I'm from the University of Puget Sound, and I support ePortfolios here. I'm the ePortfolio program manager. And I am actually helping to support a series of learning communities that are meeting over the summer around undergraduate research projects. And so when I saw this title, I thought it was really intriguing, and I was really interested to see how you were helping students to document that. I guess I did want to have a question. Sonja, are you helping students to document research for a paper, right? So not like a research project, but I'd love to see the way that you kind of facilitate that process, because I have faculty members in seminar classes that do something similar, and I'd love to see how you do it.
Yeah, cool, thank you.
And actually, Sonja, your project is both, it is a research paper, but part of that research paper is doing some kind of actual research, mostly survey research, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
I guess I'll go next. I'm actually going to be facilitating a paper in working class protest culture in the fall. Ooh. And I'm curious to see kind of the specifics of how you integrate the reflective pieces in, because I really want to make sure that on the one hand, I'm not offending people who actually are working class, you know, the ones that the few at my institution who are first generation, but also that we don't just stereotype them as an other, that it's this kind of, you know, visit to the zoo kind of thing. So I want to have to build a certain empathy with a demographic that for the people who don't belong to it, but also to respect people who already are there. And I think the reflection pieces will be really crucial in sort of watching that and sort of catching things as they go.
Yeah, yeah. I think I really want to take your class. But I think one thing I do is I have my students apply theory in the paper. And so we develop a theoretical lens together. And the class that I teach is called Power and Imagination. So the lens that the theoretical lens we use is looking at it through power and imagination, and they define power, they define imagination, they talk about how those two things work together, then they talk about how those connect to the topic. And I can imagine in that sense, when you are looking to develop empathy, like the theory might be the place where that connects, where you could be like, you know, I don't know, you could develop an empathy lens. And like, you know, use that to view what that's coming through. And I mean, then it's original research, because, you know, that's not prolific everywhere. And I think that's the other piece for me that for my students is having those reflective pieces and really personalizing it in some way. I think we've worked really hard to pretend that research is objective. And I think acknowledging that it's not and bringing your perspective is one way to facilitate critical thinking and understand different perspectives and points of view. And so I do think that's a piece for as an undergraduate research project and paper, that because they have more of their self in it, it's new. It's not the same as other things that have come before. So, all right, I will should I go through some examples and then we could like have conversation about that? Okay, I'm not gonna share my screen just yet. I'm gonna first kind of go to the place that I need to be.
And while you're getting there, Sonja, let me just let everybody know that I put the link to your video in the chat, and I'll also put it in the other AAEEBL pages, but yeah.
Awesome, thank you. Okay. And I try to limit how many tabs I have up, but I once again have too many. This is one of my students from last year, and this is her whole ePortfolio. So I have, like, this is her homepage, and she has these workbooks. These 3 workbooks are about their academic identity and engaging with the goals of learning outcomes of the class. But at the end is the research project. So this is the first page. She did a research project on foster kids. And so the first thing I have them do is talk about what their topic is and kind of why they're motivated to do this research. And then they choose an image to attach. And that just comes from the work I did around the the academic identity piece, because we were looking at photo voice as a research methodology of the power of images, particularly for marginalized populations. And so we have these images, and then there's links to their annotated bibliographies and then their lit review. And I do it's like very brief, where I have them look at 2 peer-reviewed articles that offer different perspectives on their topic. And then in the annotated bibliography, I ask them to give examples of 2 quotes and 2 paraphrases with correct citations, because this is the piece that's like the banking part where they have to learn the proper structure. And then the final part is a short paragraph talking about why that article is important to their topic and their paper. And so once they've done that, then they really have all the tools to put together their lit review. I give them a structured outline of like, here's your introduction, talk a little bit about the first article, talk about the second article, how do they relate to each other, what do they have in common, what's different about them, and then what else do you want to learn. And I just do like a 2-page lit review initially, because really what I want them to get is the task of placing the articles in conversation with each other. I don't need like 10 pages and 5 different articles to do that. And it just seems like it's very straightforward and quick. And then later I have them add additional articles. But just for this piece to get to that point, that's what I have. And then they do a reflection, sort of what they learned in just those 2 articles and putting them together. And she just says, you know, one of the things I find most surprising regarding this topic is the foster system fails to meet the need of many children in the system, which surprises me, because the system gets paid to support those kids physically and mentally, since they go through a lot. And so just like, you know, she's thinking about like, why is this happening? Right? And like, what's going on? And this is a problem, and I want to figure out how to do something about it. And then
can I just add something, Sonja? Yeah. Or I think what's kind of remarkable when you were talking about the literature review is how you're scaffolding this, that you are, you know, you're asking them to do something actually that is achievable, looking at 2 articles and thinking about them in conversation with each other. And one of the books that they use in university studies quite a bit is I Say, They Say, which, if people have not heard of that book, is a really great resource, I think, especially for students that haven't been exposed in the university yet, to be able to think about what academic discourse is and why we write the way that we write. That why piece is really important. So it seems like this is an important first step for them to really get engaged in academic discourse and understand it more than just sort of writing a report about what they read.
Yeah. And actually I've used that book. I used to use it all the time. And so it's definitely, that thinking is embedded in when I approach what I want to ask for my students from research. So that book, and then the other piece that informed this was our original white paper for how we've revised our general education component. And there's a section in there where it talks about the importance of students being able to place 2 competing thoughts in conversation and evaluate them, and that critical thinking piece. And so, and the way I've taught that the They Say, I Say book in the past is, there's a great example in the book about comparing an academic paper to going to a party and being in conversation. And so I just really, it's all about being part of this conversation. And I was talking with my mentor yesterday, because I'm teaching families and society this term. And I used to do like a sort of researchy narrative paper, but now it's just narrative. And then but theory applied, because that seems to be the place where they have their flow of communicating is easier. And I just said, we were talking about it, and I said, you know, there's these basic conversation threads that are part of our society and other societies that have been around forever, and they're going to be around forever. And so it's just, how do you engage with that made big conversation, and it could be around what does it mean to be a family, or what does it mean to be financially secure, or what does it mean to be part of a social group. And so all of those things, they're just ongoing conversations, and there's no, like, we don't get done having the conversation because we keep learning and growing. So all right, so the second part of the paper is they do like a mini presentation, which is just introducing their topic and talking about the articles they used, and then talking about power and imagination, and then talking about what they want to do for their survey, because they collect data in the form of a survey. And then in class, I had them, the start of second semester, we kicked off with showing each other the mini presentations. And they all wrote on Post-its to each other, like, positive comments about what, and like maybe suggestions for questions for their survey. And I have to tell you, it was so amazing to watch them look at each other's projects. It was completely silent for the entire class period. They were just absolutely engrossed in the work that each other had done and learning from each other. And I honestly never had an experience like that in high school. But, so that was really cool. I'm like, oh, I'm on the right track here. And they talk about, they have this reflection on their data and methods. And so like this becomes something that they can build on later when they talk about how they conducted their research and who they talked to, who they surveyed. And then there's a link to, I think this is the actual survey. It's probably closed now, but potentially you could take the survey. I mean, you probably still could take it, but I don't know if they're paying attention to the results anymore. And then the raw results that they got, I had them use Google Forms because it's just real easy. And then the results come already in a graphic form that they could cut and paste and put in their paper as charts. And then I have this reflection on their findings. So it's like something that surprised me when I asked the question, have you ever thought about or plan on fostering children in the future? And many people actually said yes or maybe. I was expecting people to say no, because usually people would rather adopt than to foster, but seeing that people are actually interested in fostering makes me so happy, because there are many kids that need a loving home. Based on some of the participants, I know some of them would be great foster parents. I think she might be talking about her teachers. And I think overall my results match my expectations, because I asked them to think about, like, did the results confirm what you thought? Because in the setup, I forgot, I also have them say, what do you think is the most important question about your topic? And what do you think the answer to that most important question is? So they're thinking about, like, what are they going to find? And she talks about, like, I didn't really see patterns, but she talked about, they matched with her research because there's a question, how much do you think foster care affects the mental health of children? And almost all of the participants put 5, which means a lot. And that was something she found in their research, that it really impacted the mental health. So that is great, because it's a good setup for her talking about her findings and her conclusions. And then the last piece that they do is their final paper and another image. And then she talks about what her biggest takeaways are from the project, and like what she would want to do next. What would be the next question that she would jump into? So that's the overall project. And I have in my ePortfolio, I have student examples. So I have several. And I took, let's see, this student did hers on sleep deprivation, insomnia, and how that impacted adolescence. She's a very anxious student and like worried a lot about her grades and her future and what was going to happen. And so this was like, you know, very personal for her. And she really wanted to, like, I think, basically say, you know, to her parents, stop stressing me out so much because I'm making me not sleep and it's bad for me and my grades overall. So what was really cool with her is that she jumped on to do address my feedback while I was giving it one day, as we use Google Docs to do all of the assignments. And so I was, making suggestions and commenting, and she started making changes, and I saw she was on. So then we started having these side conversations together, and we got in this really super deep conversation. And then we saw each other back at school, and we were like, oh, that was so fun. Let's do it again. So we made a plan to we made an appointment to do it again. And then that was also really powerful, because in that conversation, we were talking about what she wanted to do and for school. And we were having this back and forth, and the end of it, she's like, well, I guess I don't really know. I don't know what I want. And it was this, she's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I don't know what I want. I've had this plan my whole life. I'm like, oh my goodness, what did I do? So, but then I just realized how powerful that was. So I started to try with my students, please, in other moments I had, we jumped on paper together and did have side conversations around what was going on. And then it helped them, when they were stuck, they're like, I don't really know what's going on, but being there in the moment with them can help them get through. She says the most interesting thing that she found was that chronic sleep loss actually impairs the ability of adolescents to remember or concentrate and creates attention deficits. And then in her second phase, the survey confirmed her initial findings. And she says, I was not able to demonstrate how an increased amount of sleep could result in positive changes. My research does add additional insight into the research for my literature, as it helped me understand the negative impacts experienced by adolescents more clearly through their individual and personal stories. And then here's her, and her last graphic, and then her biggest takeaways. It's inarguable that sleep deprivation has negative impacts on adolescents. So, and if I were to do later research on this, I would dive deeper into the research behind the science and medical perspectives on this topic, which is kind of a nod to she has been pushed all of her life by her parents to go into medicine. And so she's still thinking that she might do that. So here is a little hook for her to think about. She could actually tie it if she does go into medicine. Maybe this is an area that she wants to specialize or focus in. And I've seen from some of my students, I just had my first cohort just graduated from college that I had as high school seniors, and several of them I keep in touch with, and I've watched them, many of them built on their research projects that they did as high school seniors. So that's awesome for me. But anyway, let's see. And I think I'll do a couple more just real quick. This student, she did hers on skin lightening, and she found this really interesting study on racial capital and skin color and skin tone. And we were, in doing this, when we were talking about it together, she had her study ask people to look at different skin tones and then give feedback around feelings associated. But the skin tones, it was I don't know, there's 10 different tones. And I was like, you know what? It just, when I look at this and read what you're writing, it just seems so ridiculous to me that people, the color of their skin is going to be a barrier, that they would somehow be thought of as less than because of the skin color. And, I know that that's dumb all the time, but this really is oh my goodness, it's just really, are we going to do this? So that was a fun moment for us. And she put here, This reminded me of grade school, because when I was in elementary school, I specifically remember textbooks with pie charts and the different terms like Chicano and mulatto, like all of that. And when I think back about that, I think, oh, that seems really horrible. I can't believe that we were in school actually talking about that and learning about that. So I had this little bit of flashback when she was talking about that. She said her biggest takeaway is that people in the current generation who are peer pressured to change their skin tone or looked down upon because of theirs might not realize that it's solely based on their skin tone, but with the assumptions and stereotypes that many people may subconsciously hold in the back of their minds from generations passed down. And in this class, I mean, I guess I should say this class, well, it was really special to me in so many ways, but there were only 31 of them for various reasons, but only 2 of our students in the class were white. And so it was a very diverse class, and they came from all different backgrounds. And so we had a lot of conversations throughout the year also around race and racial justice and equity. So, and then the last research project, this one I also, in the video that Tracy shared, I show this project. I took it and put it in Google Slides instead, but with the same pieces, just because I use PebblePad, but I know that other people want to use different platforms. And it just was a way to show that you can use the same concept and idea in different platforms. And just doesn't necessarily look the same, but there's no, like, Google Slides are super easy and almost everyone can access them. I mean, you could get a Gmail to do them. So I think that having different ways that students can adapt to different ideas, I think is important. So, and this student, she did her paper on gun violence. And in the for the first part, she said, she's discovered shocking facts. I started the research with the expectation of finding reasons and some suggested solutions, but instead found many experts in the field expressing concerns about the lack of gun violence research due to a bill that was passed prohibiting federal funding. So like I love this piece because she actually was like, I didn't find what I thought I would find in the research. And then that made her curious. And she talks about her next steps. And then she goes into, I found some surprising results that contradicted my expectations. For example, I didn't expect the respondents will have different definitions for what gun control means. I found it really surprising that 45% of the respondents thought that mental illness is the biggest contributor to gun violence. But then after doing additional research, I found this percent does match what the population as a whole thinks. So she's like, I found this in my survey, it surprised me, but then I went and did more research and it made sense then. And then she talks about emerging themes such as fear, disappointment, curiosity, surprise, and confusion. And then when she goes to her big takeaways, she talks about what she might do in the future. Various possible causes were mentioned, such as obsession with guns influenced by Hollywood, the media, property, hate, racism. Each topic can be a center of research that can help me have insight of how much contributes to gun violence. And another important research to do would be about how the system contributes to the perpetuation of gun violence and how politics are interfering with reaching a solution to a serious public health problem. And like her paper, really at the end, I was like, you need to go to grad school like tomorrow. And English is not her first language. So like being able to do a formal research paper that just was really would blow anyone away reading it. I thought, please come take my class next year because I just want to keep seeing you and talking to you and hearing more about what you have to say. But some other things that happened that were interesting and surprising for me and powerful, because all my students choose what their topic is, they're going to have to apply power and imagination, but they could say, here's these terms, but I don't really see where they fit in. That would be fine with me because it's just an exercise for them to understand the pieces. But that it turns out they tend to fit in with most things the students want to talk about. But one student did her research on the DACA program, and she did a mixed method study. So she did a survey, but then she also interviewed people who were in DACA and like talked about their experiences. And then she like found like not only the peer-reviewed articles, but went and found like, you know, like policy reports around it, and like sort of incorporated all these different things. And so it just also is very flexible. So like some students struggled with just like finding particular articles and then putting the pieces together, and they just, for whatever reason, they like weren't interested in being in school anymore. They got senioritis. They like don't, and the project may be tedious, but they could get through it because it was scaffolded and the pieces were small enough that they could do them. But then, and some students just really gave it their all and expanded it into this thing that they're definitely going to be able to use going forward. And I was able to, several of those students are taking my class next year at Portland State. And so we had a group meeting and we're talking about kind of how the year went in remote learning. And I asked them about the paper and I said, you know, I'm sort of thinking in the remote environment and like, how can I simplify, and what do you guys think, should this be a group project? And they all said no. And they said no because they said, then maybe some people wouldn't experience pieces of what needed to be done, and they wouldn't learn how those fit in and why they need to do them. And secondly, because maybe they wouldn't agree on a topic and they really liked being able to pick their own topic. And just several of them said, I just learned so much, and I wouldn't have learned as much if it was a group project. So consequently, next year's class is going to have their own papers to do. But I think that with the pieces, and I think there's just ways that I can offer additional support, but they can also have these examples from this year students to look at, and that those will all be helpful pieces.
I always find it interesting that when we actually ask students about their learning and what they want, that they choose harder things than we would think that they would want.
Yeah. And I think like in the beginning of the year, I hand out the assignment and it has like all of the pieces and the dates, and like the beginning date is, you know, in October and the end date is in May, but it's still like, they're like, oh my gosh. And I say, just don't worry, actually don't even look at that. I just want you to like, some people need the big picture. But it's really, you're not going to know along the way. And then they end up with like this 15-page paper and they're like, how did that happen? You know, and then they're not scared necessarily about a large paper again. And another moment that I had with a student, I was talking with him. He did his research on voting and youth voting. And when he was going through his findings and writing up that piece, and he was like, oh my gosh, like I actually found what I thought I would find. That's crazy. Like it goes together. Like, yeah, it's, you know, it's kind of like an equation, but with words, it just fits. And he's like, yeah, that's so cool. And so kind of along the way, several of them, I think my favorite part in doing the projects with them is when they get their data and they start going through it and like they do a reflection on what they found. And I love to, if I get the opportunity to really sit with them on that piece, because we talk about, or we're like, oh, what is that? What is that about? Like, isn't that interesting? And then like it comes through when they talk about what they found. So I like that too. So any questions?
So first of all, this is amazing. I mean, and also just the groups that you're working from, you know, the transition from high school to college, and just you know, clearly the topics, I mean, they're all capable of this and everything, and with the appropriate scaffolding and the support, and you've definitely demonstrated that. So the high school students, the undergrads as well. In your experience then, what's the advantage of doing this you know, instead of having them traditionally write a research paper or create a PowerPoint presentation, what's the advantage of using the portfolio approach? You know, having, I mean, certainly from our vantage point, like we can see like, oh, these great examples, it's all sort of, you know, sort of curated, narrated, and so on. Like, but what do you think is the advantage for the students? Like, why ePortfolios?
Yeah, so I tell them when we start, when I talk to them about ePortfolio, I talk about some of the ways that ePortfolio can be beneficial as like personally for their own learning and to go back and reflect on, but also as evidence of their learning and their abilities and the skills that they develop. And the thing about research is I said, you know, you could get a job doing research. And this is one way you can show people, here, I've done this research. This is what I learned. These are the things that have developed from that. I think, and I probably will add that piece about like, what are the skills that you developed from this process and kind of put those in there too, and maybe on the front of their ePortfolio. But several of my students got jobs with the census this year. And then I had a call from, there's a bunch of research and assessment going on around spring term. And I got a call from the people that are like facilitating and organizing that. And they contacted me because I'm working on research project, talking to faculty about their experience. And they said, hey, Sonja, do you have some students you would recommend to work on this, because we can hire some undergrads to do some research with us? And I said, yes, here's these 4 students. And they did great job on their research projects. And, you know, those students could show like, if they went into and like they had some kind of interview or there was some kind of process where they were being asked about their experience, they could just show their portfolio. This is the project I did last year. And these are the things that went into it.
I think the other thing for me, Sonja, when I look at your examples, the ePortfolio, you know, not only does it allow you to scaffold the learning easily for students, but it allows, which I think one thing ePortfolios do is allow students to look back at their work and see their growth over time.
Yes.
And understand how it fits together. So I think it demonstrates to others their competency, but it also demonstrates for themselves their own competency.
And I'm looking forward to next year when I talk to students and they're going to have to do ePortfolio in my class in the fall, and they might look back on this. But I did have a former student, a research paper as evidence has always been part of the portfolio, but not the steps in the process. So it was more like the finished project, as here's what this demonstrates this learning outcome. But so I had a student last fall, and she had been my student in senior inquiry the second year that I taught at Reynolds. And then she had gone to community college and then transferred back into PSU. And then she took my class. And because we were doing portfolio and PebblePad, she went in and she was like, oh, my stuff's gone. Because she had been away from it for a long time. And so they had disabled her account. And so she had a new account. But I am a pack rat. So I had the workspace from the class, and PebblePad was able to grab her portfolio and restore it to her new account. And she said, I looked at my research paper and there was like so much more I could say. And she just had this experience of looking at, she's like, oh, wow, it's really cool to be able to see that. And I got to experience that with her in real time, which is really powerful. And she actually is a student who, prior to the whole COVID thing, had volunteered to work with Candace and I on constructing a whole 4-year portfolio of her learning. And I don't know if we can get back to that after everything, but just her willingness to engage in that with us, because she saw that, I think because she had the experience of being able to look back at her high school portfolio and see the growth for herself. And then she thought, oh, like, yeah, I would like to, you know, be able to do more of that.
The other thing that strikes me to Helen's question is the use of imagery that your students asking. I mean, the ability to use multimedia demonstrations of their learning, and I think is helpful. And the other thing for me is that it's a visual representation of their learning that others can see and react to, that is authentic, right? So those mini presentations where they're looking at their each other's ePortfolios and asking questions, and that seems different than what you could ever do, even with a peer review process of a paper.
Yeah.
You know, because that's like between two people. This, everybody knows what the topic is, right? And and I think you've shared with me, students will find articles that are relevant to each other's topics, right? And start, you know, engaging in that kind of academic discourse that you wouldn't expect to happen with freshman students, much less high school students.
Yeah. Well, and I know, like, in fairness to myself, I'm a huge research nerd and I'm real excited about it. And so, like, they have to be really rude to, like, check out with me and not, like, engage in some level of excitement. And actually the students out at Reynolds are just really kind. Like, as a group, I have found that community to be very thoughtful and kind, and the people that take senior inquiry out there, just that level of rudeness is really beyond them. So I luck out in that way, I think.
Hey, Sonja, how many of the students from Reynolds go on to Portland State?
This year, I mean, it was a small class, but I think at least a third of the class is going. And the first year I taught, I had, like, eventually around 20%, maybe more than 20% ended up going there eventually from transferring. And I used to teach at Madison, and we have a high level of coming over from there. So I don't know what it is about what I do, or if it's not me, that also is fine. But the schools where I've taught at, the percentage that comes to PSU is higher.
So, okay, so there are two things that stood out. So you said research nerd and then pack rat. And it just made me think that a really interesting research question might be that, and, you know, and also as you've revisited with these students and so on, is that, you know, for the students that come, you know, let's say, like, would there be any way, like longitudinal study essentially, like, would there be any opportunity to potentially follow up with students who were in your previous class, either as high school students or early on, and then be able to show them their portfolio again, 2 years, a year later, 6 months later, 6 years, whatever, 2 years later, or so on, and then ask them what they think. You know, like, you know, like the student who reflected on it said, "Wow, I totally would have done things differently." Because again, you know, your student may never go on to write another paper about foster kids, but they may go. They certainly, we hope, will go on to do research in some form or another. And so when we talk about those transferable skills, does that become more evident? You know, where so I did this paper and I wrote it and I turned it in, and then I never thought about it again. But, you know, being able to kind of visit with them later to say, what were the skills that you gained? What have you used again, you know, out of, because you so carefully scaffold this entire process.
So I'm totally doing that study. It is the next thing on my list. And I have had some informal conversations around that with some of my students because I keep in touch with many of them. In fact, one of my students, I thought I saw her in DC when we were there for AACNU, and I was like, I should go say hi, but maybe I don't know if it's her or not. And then we got home and we're friends on social media, and she had, like, posted pictures of they stayed in the hotel, and they were like, and I was like, you were there, and she's like, oh, I know, I saw your picture, and I was like, I was just there. And so she just graduated from UP, and she got accepted to grad school at Notre Dame. And she actually was in my first, she's in my first cohort. And at the time I was on a strategic planning for the university. And because of my enthusiasm for the program, one of the people on the committee was like, oh, we need to do an article about senior inquiry. They had the communications department send out people and took pictures, and they interviewed 2 of my students. She happened to be one of them. And I had been searching through something on the website, and that article popped up. And I sent her the link and I said, hey, do you remember this? And she's like, oh my gosh, why did I stress my 18-year-old self out by applying to 22 colleges? I can't believe I did that to myself. I'm like, you should come and talk to students. And so like, I know that if I ask her, like, can we go through your portfolio, and kind of like, she would be totally into that. I had another student that came, he graduated a year early because he took senior inquiry, and it gave him enough credits, and then he worked really hard and did summers. And so he graduated a year early with a job at US Bank. And when we came to campus as a class, he came over and met with us on campus and talked to students about how senior inquiry had helped him. And he talked about the research paper, and he said, I saw other people struggling and maybe not making it the first year, and I never had that worry because I knew I could do it. And because of my experience in senior inquiry, and particularly the research paper. And I had another student say that she used it as a template for a research paper that she did in college. And then, and I mean, multiple students have said that. And I also had them, the last year I was at Reynolds, they have this undergraduate research symposium. And so they entered their projects and did posters around them. And the posters became part of their ePortfolio, but they also got to take the poster home with them. I'm sure that some of them have it on their wall. And this one of my students, it was just really incredible. She did her research, something about economics in South China, I think. And I saw that picture of her standing next to it. And then we're friends on Facebook, and over time I saw like 3 other poster presentations that she was in at U of O when she went there, and like started to do other things. And she got really like, there were some high level project that she did, I think even with grad students, that they partnered together and did these projects. And I know that the experience of doing those things in senior inquiry helped them with the skills and the confidence that they could do those things. And like my advisor for my doctorate said, you know, when I was doing the poster project with my students, she was like, I've never done a poster at a presentation before. And I was like, oh, this is great that they're having, and I got to tell them, like, you know, some people that have their PhD and they're a professor and they haven't done this. So like, you're actually doing, you know, the real work of academia. And when we went to the conference, some of the students presented, and one student ran up to me and she's like, oh my gosh, there was a professor in my session and they said I should publish. And I was like, that's awesome. I mean, you know, just to get them to understand that research is not dry and boring, or it doesn't have to be. That's like one of my favorite things about that. But yeah, I'm totally going to do that study, Helen, and I'll let you know as it's progressing what I'm finding.
Please do, please do. And of course, we have the AAEEBL review, the International Journal of ePortfolios. So, you know, and then plenty of opportunities to present. So that'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
Great. Any final comments or questions for Sonja? Any pieces that you'd like to take back to your own practice at this point?
Well, I may have to hit you up on Slack later. I'd like to hear more about how the power and imagination lenses work. And I just want to reinforce that I have the music students for 4 semesters in a row. And when I had them look at the paper they'd written the previous semester, I didn't have to make any comments. They made them all for me. And that was such a powerful experience. It's like, okay, I'm doing this from now on.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome.
And they're tough on themselves.
I think I really love the balance that you struck between documenting evidence and having strategic reflection, but not overwhelming them on either end. I thought that balance felt so appropriate and very thoughtful. And so I really love that, because I have faculty members who want to do everything, all ePortfolio, even the lit review in ePortfolio. And I'm like, but if a Google Doc works great, then why not marry the two together? Because, you know, utilizing the strengths of each platform in each space, but then pairing it with really thoughtful reflection like you did, I thought it was really, really inspiring.
Awesome. Thank you. I had asked, and I'm sorry that, you know, it's summer and they didn't get here, but I had asked some of my students if they would be able to come and talk about stuff, but that's like a goal of mine, is to get students to come with me. And I'm hoping that, I feel like there's going to be more virtual conferencing in our future. And like, even if we get to be face-to-face, why should we lose this method? Students can still come this way. And if they can't afford it, or they can't afford to take the time, that's a way for them to be involved in the process.
Good point. Victoria, do you have anything to add?
No, I was just gonna say that, like, this is awesome. And I don't do research, but part of our department does, and I'm probably gonna tell them all about this because this is awesome.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, and I'm happy to nerd out about research anytime. So feel free to message or email. I'm happy to chat. And I'd like to learn more about what you all are doing too. So.
Well, great. Thank you so much, Sonja, for getting up early. And Sonja told me this morning her son usually doesn't wake up until close to noon, and he woke up at 7 today. And so she had to quickly make breakfast for him before all of this.
He's 11 and 11 and a half, and he's a bottomless pit. My other son, he won't eat until afternoon because he's like, my metabolism is not getting started until then. But Liam is like, he wakes up and he needs constant food from like sunrise to sleep.
Great. Thank you so much, Sonja.
Thank you, Sonja. And nice to see everyone here again today. And a reminder that we have upcoming events this week. Tomorrow you should be able to see the gallery of work that people have contributed in the collaboratory, as well as the featured speakers that we've had. And then on Friday, there's several events that are going to be happening. And Helen, later this afternoon, right, we have, I think at 12:30 our time.
12 o'clock, we have, yeah, that's right. We have, 12 o'clock Pacific, we have Terry Rhodes talking about ePortfolios and the value rubrics. And then at 4:30 Pacific, 7:30 Eastern, we'll be having a members sort of information session about AAEEBL. Yeah.
Great.
Awesome.
Great.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Okay. See you around again.
Bye.
Bye. Hi, Sonja. Good job.
Thanks. That was fun.
Okay.
I love AAEEBL the